Hey, Wayne Fox here. How about all these cameras? I got a couple more boxes somewhere, especially a lot of old point-and-shoot digitals, G5, G7, G9, a few others. I think I got a Lumix. Panasonic had another one. Anyway, I just bought another camera. I bought the the Fuji GFX 100S. I have had the Fujis for a while. I bought the original 50, and then it's 50 megapixels is pretty nice, but I had a 61 Sony at the time, and I just didn't like the ergonomics and didn't really fall in love with it. Then I bought the 100 thinking, well, maybe the 100's got enough, but it's such a bulky, boxy camera. I just really didn't like using it. And so it kind of sat as well. Stuck mainly with my Phase 1 and then sometimes my Cambo. And I'm going to talk about all these systems in a minute, because when I decided to buy this one, I really was trying to find a system that I could live with. It could be my primary system, really my only system. Things have changed a little bit, and I really do like what I've got. So I'm going to make the video about, what these others have that I'm going to lose, what this has that I'm going to gain. To do that, I thought I'd kind of do an introduction about my journey through capture, if you will. Talk a little bit about my film. And then I decided, that's probably 2 videos. So I'm going to do another video. The reason these are all out here is kind of to talk about that. And I think you'll find it interesting. It'll be out, in a week or 2. That's going to focus on the difference between film and digital and why that whole transition really was the doom of Kodak, and why the camera was really not that important of a step in film photography as compared to digital photography. But anyway, let's talk about this camera, why I bought it, what I'm going to give up with these others, and hopefully I make the right decision. I've got 4 systems here. I'm probably going to end up with 1, maybe 2. Let's just talk about what I'm going to lose, what I'm going to gain, and why I made the decision. The Fuji was an experimental system, and I really didn't use it much. I had hopes for it, but until the 100S came out, it just wasn't for me. So really I had 3. The Phase 1 system, it was my high-end system. It's my go-to system. It's most of my work on my website and my gallery were taken with a Phase 1 system, various digital backs over the years. Currently, this is a 150 megapixel back. The glass is incredible. It's built by Phase 1, but designed by Schneider. Amazing glass. The zoom ranges are great. The main thing I'm going to lose is the technology in the back as far as the computational photography. There's one feature of this system that I absolutely love, and that's the frame averaging, which is built in, automatic, and it doesn't lose anything. Now, you can average frames to accomplish many things, but the main thing you average a frame for is to get the effect of a long exposure taking short exposures. Let's say that you're wanting to catch a waterfall and you want it to be blurry. Well, if you can't hold a shutter open for long enough to get it blurry, you can take a whole bunch of images and then average them, and you'll get a very, very similar effect. I actually have a video on this. I'll throw it up in the corner. Here's a couple of pictures before and after. It's actually pretty effective, especially if you're using a camera like this, which is capturing 20 frames a second. You can get some pretty good, hand holding. It looked like a tripod shot. Everything's tack sharp except for the water that's blurry. This camera does it on the fly without any interruption. So basically it takes each scan, which I don't know is around a half a second, I don't know. But each scan, and it will average it together. So I can take a picture like this here with no neutral density filters. Now, the Fuji can average them as well. You can take a picture, then you can take another picture, then you can take another picture. Well, I can't sit there and snap it, and average it. This, you just hit the button, you set it all up, and it'll just average it. So that's the one feature this camera has that's really awesome. I wasn't carrying around ND filters anymore. I wasn't carrying around, I didn't have to, worry about putting a 10-stop ND filter, so I could go down to a 15, I could get the equivalent of a 30-second exposure time in the middle of the day. It's an awesome feature. I don't know why they haven't put it in this. I don't know if the Phase has just better technology as far as the processor, but that's what I'm going to miss with that. The Sony is an interesting one, and This is kind of the main reason. The reason I had the Sony was sometimes this was too heavy. Let me just give you an idea. If I pack my full phase 1 system, it's almost 16 pounds. And my full Sony system is about 9.2 pounds. I'm almost 70 years old, and hiking 2 miles on a kind of a bum knee with 16 pounds plus everything else that has to go in the camera bag is pretty bad. So if you can drop 6 pounds, that's actually pretty dramatic. This didn't change it much, but what I found with the Fuji when I bought it is the Fuji system. If I pack the full Fuji system, I'm at 9.5 pounds of camera gear versus 9.2. So I'm not gaining anything. I'm not really saving enough weight to justify this anymore. The other thing I would lose from the Sony system is the ability for long reach telephoto lenses. I actually had the Sony 2-600, which I sold because I never used it. I don't find myself, I'm not a wildlife photographer, so that's a feature that I really didn't need. This gives me 200 millimeters, but if I crop it to 60 megapixels, I get about the same as I do with this 200 millimeter on this one, right? It's basically the same. So the Cambo system is interesting. Basically, the Cambo system is a miniature view camera. Has a bellows. The digital back is on this camera. It would sit right here. Obviously, it has incredible flexibility. All the glass are prime lenses, incredibly outstanding optics. These are the Rodenstock. I do have one that's a Schneider. Optics are really a level above what you get on a 35 millimeter camera, especially when you use zoom. The ability of a little view camera, a couple things I would lose if I were to sell this system. And so I might actually keep this system. It's weight-wise, it's much better, and we'll talk about the weight in a second. But the first thing I lose is when I shoot with this system, it's very, very satisfying. It's very deliberate. You have to pre-plan. It's obviously nothing you can work with too quickly. You're really careful about where you're going to be, what time you're going to be. You're going to really focus in. It's really a different type of shooting. It's very rewarding. I find it extremely satisfying, almost calming. So I would lose that. A couple other things I'd lose as well. For example, with this camera, I can do a technique called the Scheimpflug effect. Now, Scheimpflug means that I can take and I can tilt this lens. That's swing it. I don't want to swing it. I can tilt this lens in relation to the back. I think you can see that. And by doing that, it's quite possible to get everything in focus from a foot, 2 feet, all the way to infinity. Now, it all depends, as long as there's not tall things sticking up, kind of depends on a nice gradual release to the distance. But for example, here's a photograph I took one of my first tries with this effect. And here, if you see me zoom in on the plants in the front, you'll see they're very sharp. And now I'm going to zoom in on the mountains in the back and the pine trees. And this is one shot. This is not a focus stack. And it's a very rewarding way to shoot and very exciting, especially in cases where you can't do a focus stack, like there's a lot of movement involved. So I thought I would throw another example in really quick. This is a shot I took down in sort of the middle of Utah. And here you can see with a single shot, I have the sand and all the detail, including the trails left by some insects. Sharp in the front, and the butte in the back is also sharp. And again, this is one shot, probably f8, maybe even a little less than that. I don't like to use f16, f22 to get depth of field, because then you get into diffraction problems and you get softness that even though you can take it out a little bit, it's still not quite as good as just getting the whole thing sharp. So Scheimpflug effect is pretty cool to use, and there are lots of circumstances where you can use it. And the Cambo with its various shifts and tilts makes that possible. The other thing that I would lose is the ability to do rise and fall. And basically that's a technique where you raise the lens in the back, let me loosen that up. You raise the back or lower the back in relation to the lens. And what you accomplish by doing that, don't know if you saw that or not. What you accomplish by doing that, you know, when you're taking a landscape picture and you've got trees and you tilt the camera up, they'll converge. Same with a building. Architect photographers use these a lot. Now, nowadays, that can be digitally fixed really quickly, really easily, and very effectively. So I don't use that as much, but I still think if I can do that with the camera instead of digital, that's less manipulation of data, more likelihood of getting pure pixels when I take the shot. So that's kind of what I would lose with this camera. I really do enjoy shooting with it because it's it's so different than anything else, and it's kind of the best of both worlds, best of film and best of digital. So the GFX 100S will become my main camera. Losing some stuff with this, but 100 megapixels is really good. I would say that 95% of my images I shot with phase 1 before it was 150 megapixels. 100 megapixels is really good, and of course I do a lot of stitching, horizontal panos, which is 7-8 shots, equivalent of 500-600 megapixel camera, and I can do that with this camera as well as any of these others. A couple of things I gained with this: it's got a really nice focus stack ability. Sony doesn't have it that I've found yet. Maybe it's got a firmware update. I haven't used a Sony much, so I don't know. The phase 1 had it, but I like it's a little easier to set up with this one. So basically you just say focus, here's the closest picture, here's your furthest picture, and it will calculate how many shots it needs based on your f-stop and shoot the sequence for you, and then you can bring them into software and merge them. So I've done that a few times with this. It's really easy to use. It's a nice feature. One thing I was surprised about this is the ability to hand hold it. The Sony's pretty good to hand hold, but I really didn't do it much because I really didn't do a lot of landscape work with it. Almost more video than anything. And this does video just as well as the Sony. That was kind of the key reason I decided I could settle on this one camera. But I found that, you know, if I just, you know, tighten up really tight and I get a good shot, you know, a lot of times I'll push it tight against my forehead and, you know, fire off a burst of 2 or 3 shots, even at a 15th of a second. One of those is usually tack sharp. And that's a feature that I might not use too often because I'm kind of a tripod shooter. I like the ability to look and examine and, you know, zoom in 1-to-1 and focus on the viewfinder. But boy, there's times I've used it and I've really liked it. You know, sometimes you see something and you want to grab it quick because it's maybe not going to be there very long. You got a cloud in a weird position, or, you know, something's changing very quickly. So I really kind of like it. I don't, weight-wise, I can pack this just as easy as I can the Sony. It's really ergonomically comfortable in my hand. It's a little lens heavy, but, you know, the Sony lenses are not light either. So I'm actually pretty excited to settle this. I'll be putting the entire Sony system up for sale. The phase 1 system minus the digital back, I'll be selling all that. And then maybe I'll stick with the Cambo for a little longer, go shoot a few shoots with it. I might just decide it's just not worth keeping. That, you know, that digital back is worth quite a bit, and maybe it just, even though it's a fun way to shoot, might not be worth it. So I might end up with just the one system. I'll probably do a couple videos about the Sony. Maybe I'll do a video on the focus stacking and some of the other features for those that are new to I keep saying Sony, the Fuji. Talk about some of the way I set the camera up. I like the menu structure better than I do on the Sony. It seems to be easier to navigate for me. I really haven't found the drawback yet. I really do enjoy shooting with the system and look forward to getting out this spring once the freezing, I don't know where it is in your part of the country, but most of the U.S. is in, you know, we're in a freezer right now. So I'm not much of a snow person. I don't really shoot in the snow too much. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Check back in a week or two and I'll talk about this one and how I really evolved as a photographer shooting large format. Why large format film was really way more important than probably it is with digital, but digital large format still has some advantages, and how the change from film being the major technology, the cameras didn't really change much, to digital, where the sensors became the main technology, spelled the end for Kodak, and really the loss of their film business was they just didn't have a way to compete with the digital cameras. And I was involved in that entire process. I bought Kodak cameras very, very early on, you know, $26,000 for a 6 megapixel Kodak digital camera before any of the other camera makers were making them. So you might like the perspective. Anyway, appreciate you watching. See ya.